I didn't say anything. Okay. Okay, I guess we'll start. So, hello. My name is Natalie Hall. I think everyone knows that, but I'm a senior art major here at Davidson. I'm actually a psychology and art double major, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but this is my senior exhibition show, While You Were. I'm gonna do this talk a little bit differently than it is sometimes done. I'm not really gonna talk about each individual piece just because I don't think that that's super beneficial. I wanna talk a little bit more about kind of how this body of work came to be, because I think it came to be in kind of an interesting way. So just to kind of give an overview for those of you who don't know anything about the art that is in the gallery right now, they're all paintings, and I came into the year not knowing what I was going to do at all. I knew that as an art major I had to put on a show, and I pretty much that's all I knew about it. So last year, just to kind of contextualize where I came in this year at, there's a class that you take your junior year at Davidson that is basically supposed to prepare you for the show. And I spent that whole class doing really small scale, intricate pen and ink drawings, and everything in the gallery right now is like a large scale oil painting. So I definitely pivoted this year, but pretty much all of the work in the gallery right now is from this academic year. And I came into it not really knowing what my concept was. I have, I guess, an extensive history with art. I've done art since I was a little kid, but concept is something I've always really struggled with. And I knew coming into this year, I didn't really want to make art that was trying to say anything very bluntly. Art is always saying something. I know I've been told that many times by all my professors when I pushed back against what I was doing, but I didn't have any kind of narrative or experience that I wanted to share through art. That's just kind of not how I am as a person, and it's just kind of not how my art is. So more so was kind of just leaning into the visual side. It's not to say there isn't concept to my art or thought behind it, there's both of those things, but I wanted to be really honest about what I was doing, and I knew that I didn't want to make art about myself, at least not directly. So basically what's in the gallery is a bunch of paintings, obviously, and they are all paintings of people that I don't know personally. And they have text kind of interlaced in them, and it's not my words. So what I ended up doing this year is taking kind of outside resources from magazines and using those as my reference images, and using like text from the magazines, headlines, whatnot, and kind of meshing them together and figuring out what it takes to make a painting my own. And so that is kind of how I started the year. And this is this is the only piece I'm gonna really talk about in a sense. And this is the first piece I did this year, and this was kind of what kicked off the whole body of work. So this painting started a lot of things for me. So I painted the face first. The face is an image that I took from an art magazine, and I decided I wanted to paint it. So when I was looking for a reference image, I knew I didn't want to paint anybody that I knew. And I didn't want my reference image to be my own. I didn't want any tie to it. And the reason for this, at least my reasoning for this, is that I didn't want to kind of be tagged with whatever is associated with that image. So I didn't want, if I used an image that I knew the context of, I didn't want to have to either lie and ignore that context, or kind of feel like I had to pay homage to whatever it was. And so why, when I was kind of going through these magazines, I chose what I chose, is that there was a level of ambiguity to all of them that really appealed to me. And so they all could kind of be manipulated into whatever I wanted, and what I wanted was ambiguity. And so when you see my art in the gallery, like, I hope you can react to it however you feel, but I didn't necessarily want a super like strong and blunt meaning conveyed immediately. It's just, I didn't have that in mind when I was making it, so it felt disingenuous to have that reaction from people. So in kind of making this, like I said, I found the image first and I painted it. And I didn't really know what I was going to be doing with it, but I knew that after I painted it, it still didn't really feel like enough, and I wasn't really sure enough of what, but it just didn't really feel done. And so that is when I started using text, and this is like the headline of someone's gallery. So this is someone's title, essentially, from a magazine that I found. And I put them together, and I felt like, yes, that worked. And so this kind of was like the kicking off point of all of the work that's in the gallery. I found that I really liked this kind of formula of taking someone else's photo, a photo of a stranger, and taking words that were written for some totally obscure reason to me, and putting them together, and then kind of playing with that and manipulating that relationship between the two, and figuring out when is it mine now. And so this kind of debate is something that I've gone back and forth on a lot, and this whole body of work is kind of my figuring out what does it mean for a piece of media to be my own. At what point does something stop being one thing and start being something else? So at what point does this stop being a photo that it was in the magazine, and at what point does it start being my painting? And so that's kind of what I was trying to figure out. When you walk into the gallery, well, two things. One thing is there's a book, and I encourage you to flip through it if you're interested in the process. This whole body of work was like a process. That's really the only way I can describe it. It was a lot of like false starts and dead ends and changing and pivoting and thinking that I knew what the next piece was going to be and then completely changing it. And I think the book is like a tiny snippet of that, but there's a lot of, obviously I went through like tons of magazines to kind of find these images, and I was very nitpicky about what image would work, despite the fact that I didn't know what I was totally doing at the time. I just knew that certain things wouldn't work. And so I have like a ton of magazine clippings, some prints that I did when I was experimenting with different mediums and kind of playing with paint application. There's also a bunch of text cutouts that I thought would be interesting that either were used or didn't end up getting used, but I was still really interested in. So that's all in there. It's also in there because, like I said, this whole creation of work was like a process, is really one of the only ways I can summarize it accurately. And I didn't want the show or this talk to kind of portray it in a way that it was tied together really perfectly with a bow, because I had a lot of questions, and I had a lot more questions making this body of work than I did really anything else. I just was kind of responding to questions, either questions from myself or from my very inquisitive faculty. So I was just trying to figure things out, and it led me to make this little book, and so it's there if you would like to go through it. Another thing that you'll notice in the gallery is there's a lot of men. You can think what you want of this, you can take it with a grain of salt. When I was kind of originally looking at my source material, I was pulling from magazines that I found in the back. And they were all art magazines, and they were all dated art magazines. And so when I was initially looking for my reference images, it was a lot harder to find kind of an ambiguous or not super emotive picture of a woman than it was a man. And so all of the pictures of women from the magazines during the like 80s, 90s, early 2000s, which is what I was looking at, were either all really clearly advertising something or really overly sexualized, which I wasn't interested in doing. So I ended up choosing a lot of photos of men. That's my rationale for that. Some people may not believe that. I also have a lot of brothers, so you can do with that analysis what you will, but you know, that's just worth noting if you go in there and you see a lot of men and you're curious. But yeah, that is essentially what you're walking into. I think a natural question is kind of why would you paint strangers, and why would you paint people you don't know, and what's kind of the investment in that? And I don't totally have the answer, but I think I'm kind of split between two academic fields, and it's really hard to turn off one and turn on the other. And so kind of all of psychology is like fundamentally based on being able to have distance from whatever you're doing. And so my like career path of, you know, like I would like to be a clinician at some point is going to be completely based on my ability to have distance from whatever I'm doing and whoever I'm interacting with. And so pretty much all of psychology is being objective, and then you are turned around and I come into this building and everything is kind of like a mirror, and so whatever I do is very much thrown back at me, and then, you know, a theory is made of why I've done it. And so I have had a really difficult time. I've kind of been struggling on how to balance that, and I would think that this body of work is my getting closer to figuring out how they kind of work together and how to find the balance between kind of objectivity and vulnerability and making art about myself. But yeah, I am pretty happy with this body of work. I think I'm satisfied with it. I'm really proud of it. I don't want this to come across as that I don't have concept or that I, randomly blinked and that this all appeared. There is thought behind this. I worked really hard on this. I'm really excited about it. But I didn't want to get up here and act like there is something in there that there's not. So that being said, before I take any questions, if anyone has any questions, I want to say thank you to people. So first, the gallery employees, thank you guys so much. Leah and Marissa and David, I don't think David's here, but for being very patient with me during install. So thank you, I really appreciate that. I was very scattered this week, but they were very patient. Thank you to the gallery interns who also helped me hang everything. Thank you, Brown. Not very good at math, so it was a little hard to hang them sometimes, but we got through it, so thank you. And all the other interns that helped and who are here. And thank you to my favorite intern and also my best friend, Anna Murray, my private intern, who really went above and beyond, both here physically helping me and also she's my best friend. And I definitely would not be in our major if it weren't for her constant support. Yeah, I really never even thought about being in our major at Davidson until Anna was like, you should just major in it. You could be so good at it. And otherwise I really wouldn't be here, so thank you for constantly being my cheerleader. Let's see, who else? All of my friends who oftentimes really have no idea what I'm doing, but they really have unwavering support for me, which means a lot, so thank you guys. Thank you to my coworkers who came, really appreciate it. Thank you Big Summit for letting us close for an hour so they could come, that's very sweet. My classmates, Laura and Meredith, who sat through a lot of agonizingly long conversations about what my work means and why am I making it, and yeah, just going through a lot of processes with me and just a lot. So thank you guys for being there and always giving me very insightful feedback and just being very thoughtful. My family for coming. Thank you to my parents for probably being some of the only parents that encourage their child to major in art. I really appreciate it, and for nurturing my interest from a very young age. That was really a privilege. And then lastly, of course, the faculty. Thank you, Tyler and Joelle. I know I haven't had as much time with you guys, but it was always really insightful, good feedback, and spend time with you guys. Court, my advisor, for really always seeing through my bullshit. Someone had to, and I really appreciate it. And your brutal honesty really did help me, so thank you. And then of course, thank you, Katie. None of this would be possible at all without Katie. I've truly never felt support from a professor like Katie. It is ruthless support. And yeah, it feels ruthless sometimes, but she really did push me in ways that I did not know I could be pushed or that my art could be pushed. So yeah, I think that's all. Thank you all for coming. Are there any questions? Yes, Sylvia.
Do you feel like this theme of like ambiguity and kind of honesty about like where you're drawing meaning or like lack of meaning from your art is true to you as an artist, or more just true to you in this body of work specifically?
I think a little bit of both. I think I've always really struggled with concept in my work and really feeling like it was genuine to me, and so as like in general, it's something that's continued to come up for me, but I think it's specific to this body of work in that this was kind of the only way I was able to make art and continue making art is by like kind of thinking about it critically and being kind of critical of any concept that I was mulling over, and getting this distance and using other people's media I think was kind of the only way I was able to do it. So that's part of the reason I continue to do it, is that it was working, and so I had to stick with that. Laura?
So in your selection of text and matching the text to the image, I know you have a lot of different like processes, so I'm wondering, is it like the shape and the font of the text is a big influence, or what the text says and how that relates to what is in the image, or is it more of just a natural intuitive process?
I think it has at different times been different parts of the text that's appealed to me. So initially, like I said, this was the first text I used, and I kept it the same. Like I used the same font that it was in when I found it, and so the visual component of how it was presented was definitely really appealing to me. And I also liked kind of how short and like declarative a lot of the text that I used was. I think it was kind of the opposite of the images I was choosing, in that they were so definitive and the images were really not. And so sometimes it was like the words themselves, and sometimes it was more how they looked. Some of the words I did change like the font of if I really liked it, and I didn't like how it was presented. So yeah, it was kind of a mix of the visual component, what it was saying, and also like an intuitive feeling of what matched what worked. Emma.
So you said you've been doing art since you were little.
Yes.
But if you can remember, like what, or even now, what makes you want to do it and work?
I think for a long time I kept doing it because I just was told that I was good at it, and so I kind of just kept going. I think it really wasn't until college that I got pushback on kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And since then it's really changed kind of the way that I view and make art. But yeah, I don't know, I kind of think that it was like one of those things that I started as a kid, and then it kind of just became like my thing, and then I just kind of kept doing it. And I didn't really realize how odd it felt to not do it until there was like a semester where I didn't have an art class, and it felt really odd. So yeah, I think it's something that I haven't even really thought about in a sense. It's just kind of been something that's always been a part of my life, whether directly of like making art or just kind of indirectly, and like that I'm more involved in arts. That makes sense. Grace.
You talked about how you did like tiny pen drawings and then got to these huge oil paintings. Like, how did you get there, and can you talk about what making that switch was like?
Yeah, so I did a lot of really tiny like black and white ink drawings last year. And I honestly, like, those were all totally abstract too. And I really liked them, and it was really fun, but I think it didn't really feel like quite right, and it didn't really feel like something that I wanted to like stand behind and show. And so I knew that I wanted to switch, but this year, like when I first was discussing ideas with like the faculty about what I wanted to do, it really wasn't until I like looked back at some of the work I've made in the past and like really thought about it that I realized, well, I painted people my sophomore year, and so I really liked it, and I felt like I did it well, and so I wanted to go back to it. And at the time, yeah, I definitely didn't know it would turn into this, but it was a really big switch, but it felt very natural. So let me explain it. Are there any other questions? Okay, then in that case, we can migrate to the gallery and see all the work. That's all.